What's going on, PFR Nation? This is Kevin Lau, your host of the Planning for Retirement podcast, and welcome to Volume 3 of the Whiteboard Retirement Plan breakdown, where I break down a real-life retirement plan scenario on my whiteboard. And in this case, I'll be doing it on the iPad. So before we jump into that, I just wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you celebrate. This is going to be coming out, I believe, the day after Christmas, which is my twin boy's birthday. I'm recording this the week before Christmas. So today is the 18th, Wednesday the 18th, and I'm trying to just knock everything out. We've had a crazy end of year with end of year planning for our clients. And so I'm just trying to get everything done before Friday so I can enjoy time with my family over the holidays. But I hope y'all are doing the same. Yeah, so we've got a lot to cover today. And with it being the holiday season, I need to run to my boys' school. They've got a little play going on today, so I'm trying to get this recorded before I jet out of here for the day and go watch them. So I can't be late for that, so I'm not gonna rush through this. This is a big one, okay? This is actually an existing client I've been working with for over a decade that has been retired now for 8 years. And so the title of this one is 8 Years into Retirement, How Are We Doing? Okay, and so we're actually gonna look back when they retired. Okay, so that was circa 2016. And so we're going to walk through some different phases. I've got 3 different phases that I'm going to break down and sort of show you the incremental changes that happen during those 3 phases. And ultimately, hey, how did they stack up? How did their investment portfolio shape out after that first phase, after that second phase, after that third phase? What about income? What about Social Security strategies? What about working? So we're going to talk about a lot of these things in this episode today. So I hope you guys find it valuable. If you're in the PFR Nation sweet spot, and so I like to call it maybe the 50 to 60 plus range, you've already exceeded 7 figures of investable assets for retirement. And now you're thinking, hey, can I be work optional? Can I fire my boss? Can I go travel the world? Can I go spend more time with my grandchildren? Can I go play more golf? Which I love to go play more golf personally, but that's a little bit of a challenge with 3 boys under the age of 6 right now. But occasionally I'll get out there and play. That's my goal, get them into golf. So I've got a built-in foursome anytime. I know my wife would love that because she'd say, hey, you know what? Take the boys for the day. Spend as many hours as you want on the golf course. All go to a spa day while you take the kids. I'm sure she would love that. So if you're listening, honey, that is my goal. That is my vision over the next few years. So before we jump into this, I just wanted to say, if you are not following the YouTube, if you're not subscribed to the YouTube, go to the YouTube channel, the Planning for Retirement podcast YouTube channel. So not only are these videos posted, these podcast videos posted on the YouTube channel, I'm also doing the Whiteboard Fireside Chats. You probably heard me talking a little bit about these Whiteboard Fireside Chats over the last, month-ish, maybe 6 weeks. And we've got a lot of really good ones that I posted yesterday. Came out was avoid end-of-year capital gain surprises. So that's a good one, just to make sure your investments are tax efficient. Okay, especially in those taxable brokerage accounts. I also talked about appealing IRMA. Everyone's favorite tax boogeyman in retirement is IRMA, the income-related monthly adjustment amount. I did a little video on can you appeal IRMA, and also are you going to be subject to IRMA in 2025? Of course, they look back 2 years at your tax return from 2023. If you had a life-changing event, you could potentially appeal IRMA and avoid those surcharges for 2025. I talked a little about qualified charitable distributions and making sure you avoid the common mistake that I see. If you're an entrepreneur, if you have self-employed income, I talked about the solo 401k plan, the surviving tax penalty. That was another one. Anyways, there's a ton of good Whiteboard Fireside Chats. I'll be continuing to do those weekly. I started out doing it every or twice a week. It just got a little bit too crazy, especially with this end of year. We've been just so lasered focused for our end of year tax planning for clients and Roth conversions and capital gains, tax loss harvesting, et cetera. It's just been crazy. And also our firm's been growing substantially, which has been really exciting. We're really excited about the clients that we're bringing on this quarter. If you are interested in working with me one-on-one, I'll talk a little more about that at the end of the show. I'm not going to, I don't want to plug myself right now before we get into the Whiteboard Fireside Chat, because I want to make sure that for those of you that don't care about working with me, that you can learn something and we can deal with that at the end. So our 8 years into retirement. So these clients, I'm not going to talk about any of their personal identifiable information, obviously. Okay, I'm not even going to really talk about their situation because I don't want to even disclose anything that could disclose potentially who they are. Not that they really care. I've had a conversation with them about this, but anyways, just for my personal, from a confidentiality standpoint, it's just how I'm going to my brain. So we're going to call these individuals, we're going to call them Sonny and Cher. Hopefully I didn't use that name before. I don't think I have on the Whiteboard Fireside Chats just yet. Hopefully I have not, but Sonny and Cher. They retired. We're going to flip now to this first phase. They retired in 2016. Sonny was 70 and Cher was 66 at that point in time. So 4-year age gap. And really the driver in terms of them retiring at 70 was so that Sonny could get not his full retirement benefit, his maximum Social Security benefit for retirement. So for his full retirement age, it was age 66, okay, at that point in time. And so he wanted to kind of build up his benefit a little bit more, just to sort of catch up a little bit from an income perspective. Their plan was running a little bit tight if he retired, a little bit earlier than that. So we were targeting 70, and therefore he would have the maximum Social Security benefit. And then also, of course, then at that point in time, Cher could then collect the maximum benefit for the spousal benefit, which would be her age 66 as well. So it kind of jived perfectly from that perspective. But the plan was running a little bit tight. So one of the things that is important to note in this phase one, and I hope you don't mind, I'm going to kind of jump back and forth. I'm writing on the whiteboard, but I also have a bunch of notes on my screen that I want to make sure I highlight a lot of these things that I wrote down. I spent a lot of time preparing for this one just because I was going back looking at old financial plans, looking at old statements, just to make sure the data was accurate. I didn't want to just make up a bunch of numbers because, this is really important for you guys. A lot of folks that I talk to are nervous about retirement and they'd love to kind of see, hey, how did someone who retired X number of years ago, how is that shaping out? How is that working out for them? This is why I wanted to do this version of the Whiteboard Fireside Chat, this Whiteboard Retirement Plan, as opposed to a hypothetical projection forward. This is real life stuff. So what you'll notice here in this phase one, what I called this was, and I'm going to do all green and red, by the way, in terms of writing, just because, you know what? It is the season, right? So we got Social Security, that's SS, and then we have PT, that stands for part-time income. All right, so that's very important, is that Sonny's plan was running a little bit tight. Sonny and Cher's plan was running a little bit tight if he fully retired at 70, even though he was getting the maximum possible Social Security amount. Cher was getting the maximum possible Social Security amount. The plan was just running a little bit tight for their liking, based on the Monte Carlo simulations that we ran for them, based on some of the stress tests that we put his plan through. He thought, hey, you know what? My job is not stressful. I can continue to do this. And thankfully, the company he worked for at that point in time, very, very friendly when it comes to this phased retirement. Okay, so that's one of the things I'll just kind of throw out to you all is if you're sort of nervous about fully retiring, going from like working 40, 50, 60 hours a week to all of a sudden not working at all, try the phased retirement, because I'm telling you right now, even though he was working part-time in this phase, they were doing a lot of travel. Okay, they were doing safaris, they were doing cruises, they were doing a lot of really big, great travel, and he was still able to stay a little bit active, keep in touch with those coworkers as he sort of eased into this next chapter in their lives. So that was a really cool part of this phase one. But this was in 2016. I'll point that out here. So yeah, all right. So what were those income sources? So we've got Social Security. Okay, so that's income source number one. And we've got, let's see, you know what? Should I break down each one? Yeah, why not? Why not? So we had Sonny's, and let's see if I can make this a little smaller. Sonny. And y'all know about my handwriting. It is not perfect, so bear with me on this one. So Sonny, his benefit at that point in time in phase one, we've got it $3,749. Let's call it 37. Yeah, we'll call it 3749 because the numbers will be messed up if I don't go by what I wrote down. So we got 3,749, and then we have Cher. Her benefit the spousal benefit was 1,378. Okay. So for those of you that don't know, the spousal benefit, her benefit was much lower than the spousal because she stayed home with the kids for a long period of time. So this 1,378 was basically 50% of Sonny's primary insurance amount, which was his benefit amount at his age 66. So that's why it's not an actual 50% of his benefit, because he started this at 70. All right. So that's income source number one. Green. Let's keep the theme here in green. Then we've got pension. They had one pension income, and that was $1,000 a month. All right. And that is fixed. Okay. At least that was a fixed pension amount. It does not adjust for inflation. So that's very important to note, is that the Social Security benefit that has been growing with inflation. However, the pension has not. And then we've got part-time work. All right. So what was cool about this phase is that no withdrawals from the investment portfolio were needed during this phase. And this phase lasted for 4 years, by the way, okay, up until 2020. And so we'll talk about that here in a second. But part-time work, he was making about $5,000 per month. And these are all gross numbers. So if you add all these together, I cheated already. I already calculated these in my Excel doc. So hopefully this is correct. So we've got combined Social Security of $5,127, and then we've got pension of $1,000, and then we have part-time work of $5,000. So a total gross monthly income of what? $11,127. Okay. And we didn't talk about this, but their income goal was $9,000 per month net. Okay. So $9K a month net. So as you can see, if we took taxes off the top of this one, depending on what their tax rate was at the time they were living in a state income tax state. So I'm not going to really pretend to know exactly what their after-tax take-home from that 11,127 was. But let's say effective rate was about 18%. Okay. So if we take 11,127, multiply that by 0.82, that gives us a net amount of 9124. Okay, so as you can see, they covered their income goal. Now, granted, they did a lot of travel in this one. Okay, so they were technically withdrawing a little bit from their assets, but they were able to save a little bit on a monthly basis because they weren't spending all of this 11,127 per month. They were actually saving a little bit. They were banking some in cash, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. Because I want to keep the Christmas theme, assets here. Very straightforward from a balance sheet perspective. They had about $40,000 at the time, and I'm going to call it taxable. Okay, so I'm going to call this TAX. And then we had, let's see, all of their other assets, all their other assets were in tax deferred. I probably need to make this a little smaller. And that was, we'll call it approximately $1 million. Okay. And this was, I'm going to call it TD tax deferred. This was actually inside of a 403B plan. So what was cool about this scenario was, even though at this point in time, Sonny's beginning date, his required, I'm going to call this the RBD, his required beginning date was 70 and a half. Okay. So for those of you that are too young to remember this one, the RMD beginning date used to be 70 and a half, not 73, not 75. So today, if you are turning 73, that's most of you are going to start your RMDs at that point in time. But if you're a little bit younger, if you were born after or 1960 or later, it's going to be age 75. Okay, and this was because of the Secure Act that passed in 2019, and then the Secure Act 2.0 that came out in 2022. So what was cool about this one, going back to this 403B plan, is no distributions, no RMDs needed to be made because he was still effectively employed, okay, with his employer. So he could continue to delay and defer those RMDs until he officially separated from service, which didn't happen until 2020. So they were able to allow these assets to continue to cook and compound. And if you look at the rates of return, during those years, 2016 was about 7%. 17 was about 15, we'll call it 16%. 18 was down here, minus 4.9. This was the conflict with China and the oil supply. The fourth quarter, we had bear market territory in the fourth quarter of 2018. So we had a little volatility there. And then 2019 was a nice year, positive 20%. Okay. And these returns, by the way, are not the S&P 500. I'm actually using the benchmark return for a 60-40 portfolio, a balanced portfolio, because that was this client's risk tolerance at the time and still is to this day. We maintain this 60-40 strategy throughout all of these ups and downs of the market. So really, 3 really solid years for equities and for fixed income, a 60-40 portfolio, one down year here, but, nothing to really be too concerned about until we now go into 2020, which is going to be phase 2 in here in just a second. But, I think the key things to point out here are Social Security made up their income gap perfectly relative to the part-time income that they were receiving. And that deferral of those RMDs were really, really big, because otherwise they were going to have to take those assets out of this 403B plan at the rate of probably around 3.6-ish%. So he would have to take an additional $36,000 a year from this portfolio. And of course, then he would pay taxes, or they would pay taxes, and they could have reinvested it into their taxable account just fine. But ultimately, they were able to defer those taxes, continue to allow those assets to continue to grow tax deferred, and enjoy those nice portfolio returns that they had from 2016 up until 2020. Now we enter phase 2. Okay. So this was 2020. through 2024. All right, so let's see what happened on this one. All right, so Social Security increases with inflation. So they had some cost of living adjustments on this one. All right, so that does increase their benefit amounts. And so I did some calculations on that one based on the Social Security increases. And if you look back, 2016, it increased by a whopping 0.3% because inflation was so low. 2017, creeped up to 2%. 2018, Social Security increased by 2.8. And then 2019, it increased by 1.6. So nothing major from a Social Security increase standpoint. But the important part in terms of phase two was now Sonny is going to fully retire. So no more work, no more part-time income. All right. So this phase, we've got the Social Security income that continued to grow with inflation. We've got the pension, of course, we talked about. But now we're going to have to turn on the switch for portfolio withdrawals. So let's sort of see what happened with the portfolio over the course of those 4 years and see what those values were. But first, why don't we go through the income sources? Again, Social Security, we talked about those increases. And so we've got Sonny. Now he's age 74. Now he's collecting $3,995. And then we have Cher, who's collecting $1,468. Okay. So that's nice. Combined Social Security, about $5,400 a month. That's a nice little income floor. Pension we talked about. So pension on this one, that's still $1,000. Then we've got the portfolio withdrawals. All right. So what was there? Okay, we'll talk about this portfolio withdrawals. All right. Now, I mentioned last time, or in the last phase, the income goal was $9,000 a month. If we adjust that for inflation, because at the end of the day, they were in their go-go years. They were increasing their expenses with inflation. Now, you've probably heard me talk about this before, that sometimes people can back this down. They don't need to necessarily increase inflation at the same rate, but in this case, they did. And their portfolio, their net goal was $9,800 a month. Okay, was their net goal. Okay, so based on a rough tax rate, I think we assume maybe 15% at this point in time. Oh, a very important thing to note here. I didn't mention this in 2020 during the pandemic. Like many people, they moved from a state income tax state. And when they fully retired, they moved to the Sunshine State where I was living at the time. And they moved to Florida. Okay, so they bought a house at the beginning of 2020. Really good time to buy a house in Florida. Property values were pretty manageable at that point in time. I didn't really mention this before, but they had a mortgage. And they had about $400,000 in equity. Okay, so we can call this an asset of $400,000 of equity. Okay, so basically what they did is they sold their home, they took the proceeds, paid off the mortgage, and then they bought a home with cash. So they actually had no mortgage at that point in time, but their expenses actually went up a little bit because of all the travel that they were doing now that he was fully retired. But anyways, the goal was $9,800 a month of net income. So ultimately the calculation that we came to was they needed to draw about $5,000 per month from the portfolio, or $60,000 annually. But let's see what the assets did. Okay, so taxable, those continued to compound. So taxable was at $56K. Now I'm going to make that a little smaller. $56K. Then we had the tax deferred. Now, the tax deferred, what we did at this point in time is we broke it up into two buckets. When he officially separated from service, we moved part of his assets, about $950,000, into an IRA. And then this other $323,000 was inside of a 403B plan. And the reason is because that's 100% in this fixed annuity that was proprietary to the company that he worked for. And it was just a super powerful interest rate. It was like a 4% interest rate, or maybe even it's like mid threes to high threes, but it's a really attractive rate, especially relative to that point in time. So I just recommended, I said, hey, Sonny, you know what? Leave that there. We'll move the other $950 into an IRA. We'll manage around this thing. So the IRA was a little bit more aggressive than that 60-40 target to accommodate for this 403B plan to be a little bit more conservative. Okay. But as you can see, the total value from an investment perspective is now about about 1.33 million were the total investment values. Whereas here, The total assets were about $1,040,000. So you can see that nice growth, that nice compounding, simply because he was working part-time and allowed those assets to continue to grow without touching them, even though they were phase one in retirement, they were partially retired, really made a significant impact. And if we take $60,000 or this $5,000 a month, and we basically divide it into this 1.33 million, I came up with a rate of withdrawal of about 4.7%. So nothing really too crazy or too concerning there. It's not like this is 9 or 10%. This is a very sustainable rate of withdrawal. You've heard me talk about the 4% rule thousands of times, but a 4% rule is really, really a conservative benchmark, where if you start with a 4% withdrawal in that first year, there's never been a scenario, at least historically speaking, where you ran out of money earlier than 33 years. So really confident that at least for 30 plus years, you could maintain that portfolio withdrawal adjusted for inflation. So that's a pretty cool, pretty nice scenario. And I think the fact that they're very well diversified, they've got not only the S&P 500 or U.S. Treasuries, but they also have other asset classes in the portfolio. So 4.7, not too concerning. But what's not really in this monthly budget that we put here, is that they were spending a little bit more on travel. Okay, so they were taking, I think, my estimation based on the numbers here was about to their goal, at least in the plan, was about 10K a year. Okay, so if we add that on top of the 5,000, so really technically speaking, if you add another 10 a year, the rate of withdrawal, this would have been about 70K per year was their total withdrawal. It would have been closer to about 5.5%. Still not that concerning because, you'll see what happens later on as their expenses kind of start to level off. But what's cool about this stage, a few things I'll point out is, 2020 was a rocky start. Okay, 2020 is a really rocky start to fully retire. I had several clients retire that year, and I just remember talking them off the ledge constantly. And they were one of these clients. I mean, they were very concerned, because they lived through 08, 09. They lived through the tech bubble, okay? He worked for a technology company in 2000 to 2001, and their stock plummeted, during that time. So he was having flashbacks to that time. So it was very difficult to coach them through. But because they stayed disciplined, because they stuck with the process, stuck with the plan, they enjoyed a 12.9% rate of return in 2020, 10.9% rate of return in 2021. Little bit of a blip in the radar in 2022 of minus 15% for a balanced portfolio. Worse it's been in 40 plus years. But then 2023, positive 15.8. And then year to date so far, positive 12%. So by staying disciplined to the process, it really helped their portfolio not only preserve its value, but actually grow slightly over those last 4 years, which we're going to talk about in a second. What was also cool about the scenario here by having this 403B plan that was in this fixed annuity, we took some withdrawals out of those accounts during the beginning phases of 2020, just because of how volatile things were in the markets. So instead of touching stocks when they were down, we were able to touch this fixed income or this fixed annuity within the 403B plan, as well as use some of the bonds that were in the IRA. So having that defense mechanism when stocks are down is a very important point to point out. And again, RMD age, they were already past the RMDs, but you know what? $5,000 a month, a little bit more than what's required to take out. So what I'm also going to tell you all is, don't worry. Just because the RMD is the minimum doesn't mean you can't take out a little bit more. And that's exactly what they were doing because, again, we were coaching them up to enjoy their go-go years, spend while they had their health on their side. Now let's fast forward, okay? Oh, by the way, home values went up significantly in 2020 through 2024. So we'll see the impact here in just a second. But they purchased their home for about $400,000 home value. Okay, so that's important in terms of their net worth was about 1.73 million total net worth. Whereas here, total net worth, if we have 400,000, about 1.44 net worth. Okay, so we'll talk about that in just a second with 1.373. All right, moving along to phase three. So phase three, I'm going to call this slow go. So phase three, now we're in 2024. Okay, so 2024 and beyond. All right, longevity is probably on their side. They're both in good health. Thank the Lord. They're both keeping good shape. So probably longevity on their side. But now Social Security. Okay, so what's Social Security? We've got a combined amount. I'm going to just do the combined amount, 6573. We've got the pension, 1,000. And then we've got the portfolio withdrawals. Watch this. because of the increase in Social Security over these last few years, 2021, 5.9%, 2022, 8.7%, 2023, 3.2%, 2024, 2.5%, they're earning a total fixed income of $7,500 a month. They didn't increase their expenses by that much. So they only need portfolio withdrawals in the amount of about $4,827. And their assets have grown. They spent down the taxable, so no more taxable, but tax deferred, they've got about, 1.336 million. And then they've got their home value, which was about, we'll call it $500K. So their total net worth is now 1.836 million. Okay. They took portfolio withdrawals from 2020 through 2024. Now the rate of withdrawal, if we take 4,827, annualize that, that's about $58,000. If we take the rate of withdrawal relative to this portfolio value of 1.336, now we've got a rate of withdrawal of about 4.34%. Okay, they're traveling a little bit less now. I had a conversation with them, traveling a little bit less. Things are just getting a little busy. They're just tired of traveling. They've done a lot of traveling in their lifetime, not only during retirement, but also before retirement. Look at that. Rate of withdrawal is going down because not only are they taking out less in the portfolio because Social Security has gone up, but also because their portfolio balances have been really, really kind of buoyed by the stock market and the bond market in 2024, but the stock market in 2021, 2023, 2024. Okay. And so hopefully this kind of gives you all some peace of mind that, you know what, this retirement thing can work. If you have a plan going in from an investment perspective, if you have a plan going in from a portfolio management perspective, if you have a good tax strategy, if you've got a good process, if the markets are down, where you're going to be pulling your income from, you can make this thing work and not only preserve your assets, but look at the net worth here, 1.8 million now versus look at what it started with, 1.44 million, during that phase one process. So, over 8 years, taking money out of the portfolio, increasing their total net worth. I think a lot of folks, even though it may not be your primary goal, you kind of like the idea of sort of preserving your assets, preserving your principal for the next generation or for long-term care, which is a really big consideration for any client we talk to. The nice thing is they both have long-term care insurance. We coached them up to get long-term care insurance many, many years ago, and they both have lifetime benefit policies. Okay, so these are policies that will pay if they need care for whether it's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. I don't know of any carrier that offers that anymore, but a lot of the carriers will do a 2-year benefit, 3-year benefit, 5-year, I think even 7 or 8 years, maybe even 10 years if you're lucky. But I think this is the biggest concern for them going forward is preserving their assets if one were to need care, especially if it were Sonny. Because what if Sonny needs care later on? Cher's 4 years younger. She might women outlive us anyways, but she might outlive him significantly for maybe it's 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. So making sure that her assets are preserved, because again, Social Security is going to go down to whatever, let's see, Sonny's benefit at that point in time in phase 3, it's about 4,807. So that'll go down by about 2,000, right? Pension, that'll stay actually 100%. That'll go to Cher. Portfolio withdrawals, that'll stay as is. Potentially maybe reducing that a little bit because expenses might be a little lower. But again, the long-term care concern is a big one. And I think just making sure that they have the proper documents in place if something unexpected ever happened to them, that their children could step in and easily make decisions for them and understand what their roles are and what their roles aren't as they enter this slow go phase. And again, they're still doing some travel. It's not like they're just debilitated. I mean, they're actually really, really good health, but they're starting to slow it down. They're starting to reduce their expenses a little bit, as we've talked a lot about in the show before, is don't underspend in your go-go years just to save it all for later on, because at some point, you're not going to want to do the bucket list travel. You're not going to want to travel the world and go play St. Andrews or Bandon Dunes. Do these things when you're in your go-go years, and even before your go-go years, when you're working. Think about this phased retirement, this working part-time, easing into it. Because listen, going from working 50 to 60 hours a week to working 0, that concerns me. I wouldn't even want to do that, all right? But again, hopefully this example is helpful for y'all. If you have any questions on this, drop a comment in the YouTube, drop a comment. I think you can even leave a comment in the Spotify. Would love to answer any questions that y'all have. And if you want to be featured in a Whiteboard Retirement Plan, I typically will do these every 4 or 5 episodes just to kind of mix it up a little bit. But if you are interested in this one, fill out that retirement readiness review. There's a link in the show notes, every show note, and just indicate one of the questions is, how do you want to engage with us? And what are the options are one of the options is a Whiteboard Retirement Plan. So you can just check that box and we will make sure that we feature you. Obviously, keep all of your personal identifiable information. We're not going to share any of that information, but if you want to be featured, feel free to submit your questionnaire. And if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, go to the same link, Retirement Readiness Survey, fill out the questions. We'll learn a little bit more about you, and I will follow up with a personalized video about the opportunities that I see if we were to engage and work together, and then ultimately what those next steps would be. So that's it, everybody. I hope you all, again, have a wonderful holiday season. Happy New Year to you. This is our last episode of 2024. Hard to believe it. And it's been a really great ride this year, and I appreciate all of your support. I appreciate all of you tuning in. And if you know someone, another PFR Nation type of caliber individual, like we talked about, share this show with them, because I guarantee they will find value in the content that we are putting out. So without further ado, everybody, this is Kevin Lau signing off for 2024.